there was another, in effect, open seat. And no one who was nominated by the Republican or the Democratic Party had any designation under them. And so with one of the best campaigners in this state that I know, United States Senator Debbie Stabenow being at the head of the ticket, along with a person who was running for re-election and who had been very helpful to the automotive industry and others who benefited by decisions of him being president of the United States. You had a very good campaigner in President Barack Obama. They led the ticket. And when they led the ticket, all of those persons nominated by the Democratic Party for the State Board of Ed, Board of Governors at Wayne, Board of Regents at University of Michigan, Board of Trustees at Michigan State, they all won.
Yes.
And so did Bridget Mary McCormack, person nominated by the Democratic Party.
Well, one of the things that the task force that former Justice Ryan and Justice Kelly chaired, one of the things they came out for very strongly was, in an elected system such as we have, we would benefit greatly from a diverse, not only attorneys, but more broadly based lay people as well. I'll call them screening committees and so on. You had experience, you said, in a bar association role of screening. How do you react to that recommendation of a more broad-based group of people who look at potential
I think if you were going to go to that approach, I think that's very helpful. I think if you take a look at what occurs in Michigan for a vacancy in our federal courts, in our trial courts, if there's a United States Senator of the same party of the President, then in this case Carl Levin, as a United States Senator, will form a commission. And that committee or commission would first review all of the applications. Then from the applications, they'll determine how many they want to interview. And from those who are interviewed, they will recommend 2 names for every vacancy that's there. In this case, we now have 2 vacancies coming up on the Eastern District. Judge Battani and Judge Edmonds are have chosen to go senior status, so it opens up 2 vacancies. So there will be 4 people probably recommended to Senator Levin, who also, because he believes in doing that, sharing that with the input with Senator Debbie Stabenow, then they'll make a recommendation to the president. And that works, and it works well. And I will tell you one of the things that I learned being chair of the Judicial Qualifications Committee of the State Bar, and that is when you fill out a very long, intensive application, one that I had to do myself when I was nominated by Governor Blanchard. I had to fill it out, disclose everything, and then you put down who you would choose as references if the committee chooses to call somebody. Folks would put down names of folks that they thought would be very supportive. Never called them, apparently. And lawyers are very honest in this extent. I mean, they want somebody on the bench who will do a very fine job and be fair, etc. So if they know, if that lawyer, if you list him as a reference and you call that person and say, I asked you in confidence, this person being considered for this position, etc., what do you think about their work habits, etc., etc. If they know anything that is negative, they will lay it out and it will come out. So my exposure in terms of seeing that done firsthand is that it works.
You went from the court to to civilian life for a couple of years. Did you go from the court to run for mayor? Was that in your thinking at that time?
It wasn't my thinking. I really enjoyed public service. For those of us who are long in the tooth, like my friend, Mr. Justice, Mr. Chief Justice G. Mena Williams, or Judge Damon Keith, and so many others that I've met. For us, some of us, the practice of law, or being a lawyer, sometimes is called a public service. I enjoyed serving on the Michigan Supreme Court. It was a great collegial body. When I left the court, Madam Chief Justice Dorothy Comstock Riley was our Chief Justice. I got along well with all of the members of the court. And I enjoyed being one of 7 serving the people of the state of Michigan. But I kept reading about kids at that time who were injuring and sometimes even killing other kids over jackets and gym shoes. And then about the businesses that were leaving the city of Detroit, about crime as it was starting to edge up. I felt that I could probably make a difference if somehow I was successful to run and then win. But I also felt that in order to run, I would need to resign from the Michigan Supreme Court because of the provision that had not been overturned for judges, 1. But 2, I wanted to ask everybody, what do you want? What do you expect from the next mayor, whoever it is? And I found that thought that if I needed to ask business people that question, in many instances, while the business people I would speak to about that question would not be ever before the court, their companies would be. And there is a higher ethical standard for those of us who serve on the bench. It's called the judicial canons. And we have to avoid even the appearance of impropriety. And so I resigned from the Michigan Supreme Court and I went to the University of Michigan to meet with President Jim Dudestedt. I could have gone to Wayne, but I just felt that I'd assumed that I was going to be running against the mayor, and I assumed that his appointees who serve in different departments would make it tough on anybody who would support someone who was going to run against the mayor. So I went to the University of Michigan, and I asked if he could ask members of his staff, not his staff, but professors that might have an interest in working with me, to see if we couldn't find the answers to about 6 or 7 different questions. And I couldn't promise him that I was going to run, but if I did run, I would certainly acknowledge the help that I received from the university and the individual professors who helped. And he came back to me with some names, and I used a term that I learned from working on the Law School Accreditation Committee in the section of legal education and admission to the bar. They became, in effect, my laboring oars. They were able to encourage people from other cities who had similar challenges as we did in Michigan, while I was able to go to members of our community here in the neighborhood. I could ask them, what would you want done? I mean, without sounding too glib, any fool could tell you what the problems were. I wanted some solutions because I wanted the people of this city to know that if they voted for me, here is where I want to go. Here's where I'd like to take us. And so we answered 6 questions. Another person who was very helpful to me was Phil Power. Phil's wife, God rest her soul, was very instrumental and very helpful to me when I ran to keep my seat on the Michigan Supreme Court. Sarah was just outstanding. And I met Phil then, and
Now, Sarah, was she on the Board of Regents?
I think she was at the time.
Sarah Power.
Yeah. And But she was just a very knowledgeable, warm person and wanted to be of help. And I needed all the help that I could get. Because remember, when you look at the city of Detroit, that's one thing in terms of people of color. You take a look at the state, our numbers are very small and de minimis at the time. And so I went to Phil and said, here's what I'm doing, and I'd love your help. He said, I can help you this way. You can come and meet in my office. And so we went to the Observer's office. It was on 696, and it was in between Detroit and Ann Arbor. And so that's where we would meet, at Phil's office. And we came up with a document that I think was about 56 pages long that we wrote. I had a lot of help. I had help from Nettie C. Brooks, who was with General Motors at the time, Al Lucarelli, who was the managing partner of Ernst & Young, who moved here from Atlanta, and a friend of mine wanted me to meet him. And I was on the court at the time, but wanted me to meet him when he came. I was very impressed with him, liked him and his wife a lot. And then Mike Frank, who was the executive director of the State Bar of Michigan. And we finished the document. I sent out over 1,000 people, including the Mayor Young, and say, here's where I think the city ought to go, and let it go. And then I went to the News, the Free Press, and the Michigan Chronicle, and met with the editors and reporters. And when nobody would step up and say, I will run, I announced my candidacy. And my announcement had a very huge surprise to it. The huge surprise was the longtime friend and lawyer of the mayor, George Crockett, standing up saying, I know him, etc., and I'm supporting him, and I'm calling on my friend Mayor Young not to run again. It turned out that Mayor Young did not run. He supported Art Blackwell in the primary and Sharon McPhail in the general. The knock on me was, from that quarter, was that because I believed in building bridges, we in the city were going outside the city and spending our money outside because we'd lost all our department stores that we had downtown, and the last one from Saks left from the West Grand Boulevard address up there, Midtown. And we didn't have any department stores. So we'd go outside the city to spend our money. Folks from the suburbs would come in because we had great sporting teams. We had the Tigers, and we had the Red Wings. The Lions were playing out in Pontiac, and the Pistons were out in now Auburn Hills. And they'd come in for the great cultural things that we had, DIA, come in for the art museum, for the entertainment. We have more theater seats, and only the city of New York's got more theater seats than the city of Detroit. That's not a well-known fact. But so people come up, but then they would leave right away and go out. So I wanted to build bridges, and I wanted to see if we could get a better transportation system. And we needed jobs. But I also knew and believed that jobs, the need for jobs doesn't create jobs. Businesses create jobs, and thus you've got to work with business to provide the kind of incentive, motivation, attractiveness about your city to attract business to come in. Turns out that I was fortunate to be elected, and nobody gave Detroit a prayer to win the empowerment zone. We won the empowerment zone. Governor John Engler saw what the empowerment zone was doing, came up with the Renaissance zones, which we utilized to attract businesses. We used the smart zones that he created to attract or to start up which is now Tech Town, where we've got a number of businesses that are developing and the like. And we opened up the door. The knock on me was I was going to sell the city's jewels. They had me selling the water department. They had me selling the DIA, etc. But after I got in, and people saw what I was doing and my intent, that was never